Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we're here for a poetry discussion. A poetry discussion that comes to me from literature, an aptly named book. This comes to us from Robert Frost, the poem named Out. And it reads as such. The buzzsaw snarled and rattled in the yard and made dust and dropped stove-length sticks of wood, sweet-scented stuff when the breeze drew across it. And from those that lifted eyes could count 5 mountain ranges, one behind the other, under the sunset far into Vermont. And the saw snarled and rattled, as it ran light or had to bear a load. And nothing happened. Day was all but done. Call it a day, I wish they might have said, to please the boy by giving him the half hour that a boy counts so much when saved from work. His sister stood beside them in her apron to tell them, supper. At the word, the saw, as if to prove saws knew what supper meant, leaped out of the boy's hand, or seemed to leap. He must have given the hand, however it was. Neither refused the meeting, but the hand. The boy's first outcry was a rueful laugh, as he swung toward them holding up the hand, half an appeal, but half as if to keep the life from spilling. Then the boy saw all. Since he was old enough to know, big boy, doing a man's work, though a child at heart. He saw all spoiled. Don't let him cut my hand off. The doctor, when he comes, don't let him, sister. So, but the hand was gone already. The doctor put him in the dark of ether. He lay and puffed his lips out with the breath, and then the watcher at his pulse took fright. No one believed. They listened at his heart, little, less, nothing, and that ended it. No more to build on there. And they, since they were not the one dead, turned to their affairs. So let's start with the title. The title is from Macbeth, Out, brief candle. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time, and all our yesterdays have lighted fools, the way to dusty death. Out, brief candle, life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. So that's where the title comes from. Sound and fury there as well for another title. Hemingway once said, I believe it was Hemingway, in fact, I think it was in A Movable Feast, wasn't it? Where Hemingway said that if you want a good title, it always comes from Shakespeare. Speaking of Hemingway, this poem reminds me of a Hemingway quote. A quote from A Farewell to Arms. The world breaks everyone, and let me start over. The world breaks everyone, and afterward many are strong at the broken places. But those that it will not break, it kills. It kills the very good and the very gentle and the very brave impartially. If you are none of these things, you can be sure it will kill you too, but there will be no special hurry. I believe that's the opening spiel in A Farewell to Arms. There is, in A Farewell to Arms, a great spiel at the beginning and the end of the book, and I'm pretty sure that's the one at the beginning. And if you were to look up an explanation of this poem, if you were to look up what's Out by Robert Frost about, if you were to look up Out by Robert Frost explained, what they would tell you is that this poem is about the fragility of life. Okay, maybe. I think, however, it's about third wave feminism. How many women are out there clamoring for sawing jobs after reading this? No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I'm kidding. That is not what this poetry discussion is about. What this poetry discussion is about is that I don't believe that it's about the fragility of life. I think that saying that this poem is about the fragility of life is something far too passive for what we are actually seeing on display here. The death that takes place in this poem. Look, the boy bleeds out at the end, if you didn't catch that. It happens very quickly in this poem and at the very end, so it's easy, I think, to miss. The boy bleeds out, loses his hand, bleeds out. If you can die from slitting your own wrist, you can definitely die from losing a hand, right? It's not something that we sort of really think about all that much, but certainly it is possible. It does not seem to be a fatal wound, if you think about it. Definitely it can be. But to say that this poem is about the fragility of life, I think, is to undersell the importance, the actual necessity of what it is that the boy is doing. The boy is putting in a day's work. The boy, where's it said here? Where are we at? Give me 1 second here. The boy is, I'm not going to be able to find it. It says he's putting in a full man's work. He's old enough to put in a full man's work. So that's what he's doing. We're sort of coddled in today's world by not having to do things like cut firewood, by not having to do things like cut wood with which we might build a fire to cook. Still, there are things we have to do. Is it dangerous to drive to work? Yeah. More people my age, slightly before middle-aged, die driving than I think any other cause. It's a leading cause of death, if nothing else. Something like 1.4 million people or something. I don't know. I'm a big fan of Tesla, so I get the number thrown at me all the time. I can never quite remember how many people die in car wrecks every year in the United States. I think it's over 1 million. This is a necessity. Driving to work is a necessity. It is not quite as laborious as what we have in the poem. But if we were to compare it to something, it would be something like driving to work in today's world for the average person. Would that, a poem about dying in traffic on the way to work, be about the fragility of life? Or would it be about the fact that, look, it's coming for all of us? I think that when you say that it's about the fragility of life, you're undercutting the real dastardly nature here. To say that for a poem to be about the fragility of life, there's a famous poem about someone passing in their sleep. I can't remember what it is now. I think it's actually in this very collection, but that poem might be about the fragility of life. Someone who is slightly sick falls asleep and doesn't wake up. That might be about the fragility of life. But this poem, I think, this poem is about the importance of paying attention. Just as a poem about dying in traffic might be about the importance of paying attention. Death is going to come regardless. I think that more than the fragility of life, poems like this are about the assuredness of death. I think poems like this are about how important it is to be present, presence of mind. And I don't simply mean because the boy seemed to stop paying attention and got his hand sawed off. That's not what I mean. If a moment so mundane as this, if a moment so mundane as crossing an intersection on your drive to work might be your last, the importance of presence of mind is not simply for that moment. The importance of presence of mind is for all of the moments that preceded it. To be conscious of the fact that the moments we have are fleeting. Where was it here? The moments we have are light. Where am I at here? Are lighted, and all our yesterdays are lighted, have lighted fools the way to dusty death. All of our yesterdays have lighted fools on the way to dusty death. I think that is more about what this poem is actually pointing to, as opposed to the fragility of life. That is such a passive term. And look, the internet will tell you 40% of poems are about the fragility of life, in the same way that WebMD will tell you 80% of the stuff that you search means you've got cancer. 80% of the poems ever written are about the fragility of life. No, just because a poem infers death does not mean that it is about the fragility of life. Sometimes it is about the rugged nature of life. Sometimes it's not about the fragility of life, it's about the assuredness of death. These things are smaller nuances than saying something is about the fragility of life. That, I think, is what this poem is about, the assuredness of death, the rugged nature of life, as opposed to the fragility of life. That is all I have time. I'm a little bit perturbed every time I read that poem, because it seems that there is no other acceptable interpretation except for the fragility of life. That is all I have time for with this poetry discussion. I hope to have you back for the next poetry discussion here on the channel.